podcast where we create fantastical worlds with help from you, our listeners. My name is Rob Hilferty, and I'm here with Tetrarch of Touching the Tips Together, Chris Prunty, along with continued special guest, Daniel Quinn. On today's episode, we have another listener email that we're going to read and get into. Man, it's an interesting one. I'm actually very excited. You could even say that I'm flying high on the idea to get working on it.
God.
Yeah, no, it's terrible. I love it. We have an email from Gluax Speed that says, "Hello, friends. Really love the podcast and I'm all caught up now. Would love to see a setting, sci-fi or fantasy, your choice, where for whatever reason humanity had to start living in the sky, but they still need to get resources from the land and oceans below. Maybe they can't last long on the ground or water because it was cursed or contaminated with radiation. Maybe they can't touch it at all. I want to leave it fairly open to see where you guys take it. Have fun if you pick this, and if not, either way, thanks for reading this, Gluax." So obviously we read it, and obviously we're definitely doing such a cool idea, and I'm very excited to get into it.
How do you
So-
pronounce gluax, and what does that mean?
It's an axe made out of glue.
Oh,
You know,
okay, so it's like a
that's-
gluax.
That is deserving of follow-up email, actually. On today's episode, we're each introducing 3 facts about this new setting that are absolutely true. And because I never get to go first, I'm going first this time. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about, because we've been, you all know that sci-fi is kind of not my thing compared to fantasy. I mean, I have nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with sci-fi. I think it's cool. It's just my oeuvre where I really love to live and breathe and roll around in the muck is in fantasy. And so my first tenet is going to be magic exists and is deeply rooted in the 3 fundamental forces of the universe, namely time, space, and reality. So all magic is not going to be elemental based. It's not going to be like earth and fire and whatnot. I want it to be like every mage in this setting are casting spells that bend time, space, and reality. So, like gravity, slight teleportation, stuff like that. That's the general idea that I have here. And I just have a bunch of cool ideas surrounding that.
Do have follow-up questions for that.
Yeah, please go right ahead.
So you were saying that it doesn't use elements. So if they wanted to channel fire, could they even do it, or does it have to be something that uses one of the forces like time and gravity?
Yeah, so actually that's kind of the idea that I had, is that there's no like lightning bolts and fireballs. If you wanted to do something with magic, you can only manipulate time, space, and reality. Which, I was thinking about the possibility and what that would mean. And there's actually a lot that you can do with that. Like I had this idea, and this kind of spills into a little bit of one of my second ideas, but I wanted there to be airships. And of course, when you have airships, you have cannons. But I had this idea of, imagine that you had a bunch of time mages on board and you slow or stop the cannonball barrage, whether it be incoming or outgoing, so it's like, oh, you can dodge out of the way, or you can fire the cannons and then freeze time and then leave essentially like an ambush for someone who's following, or like you can maneuver better or something like that.
You could freeze a flame in place.
Yeah, I was thinking of that, or even something, and beyond time, I was thinking about the other ones as well, where it's like with either reality or space, there's this idea that you can manipulate gravity, right? So in a setting that has a lot to do with getting to the ground safely, imagine like every first level mage or every novice mage, the first spell that they're going to learn is a way to defy or manipulate. It's going to be Featherfall, right? If we want to talk about it strictly in D&D terms, you want to manipulate gravity so you're not hitting the ground at terminal velocity. You want to be like, oh, I'm not going to die. I'm not dying for this dumb shit. I know how to manipulate gravity, stuff like that.
Oh, so like manipulating reality might be changing a rule about how like the laws of physics work, for example.
For example, I also had it like, and again, I think space is another one I do want to talk about, because everyone immediately goes into, like teleportation, but there's a lot more to space that you can do. So for example, right, like you want to tear a hole into space itself, right? So you can create something that is permeable, essentially, or you can create, like intangibility. Uh, for my big weebs out there, Chris, I know you're gonna love this reference, but Sticky Fingers from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is kind of what I have partially in mind when I'm thinking of the manipulation of space. Where, for those who don't know, first of all, you should go and watch Golden Wind, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, because it's amazing. But there is a character who can create zippers on any surface, and he can essentially create holes in things or do other cool, weird. Just go watch JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. What are you waiting for? Come on. But that's the type of magic that I had in mind, right? Where you're manipulating how time and space and reality all warp. And one other thing I do want to talk about as well is that there is, and this will actually go into my other stuff, so I'm going to leave it kind of vague for now. But you know how in the typical elements, right, there are like elemental opposites essentially. Like there's
Mhm.
fire and water and earth and air and stuff like that. In this, I actually wanted them all to be kind of codependent on one another. So it's not like there's all it's not like there's like a rock paper scissors type triangle, but it's like, hey, no, time and space and reality all rely on, and the magic that you can manipulate all rely on one another. So it's not like you can you can be a time mage, right? But you understand that you're focusing on the time aspect, but you're also manipulating space and reality when you do it, because they're all interdependent.
I have some follow-up questions as well.
Please.
Well, for one, so I just want to take another stab at a way of like getting to fire from time. Like for example, you could maybe like start a little bit of kindling and then speed up time to make a bigger, conflagration potentially. That's one way to get around that.
Absolutely.
But I was wondering, so what do you see as the distinction between reality and space? Is space like manipulating, mass or distance, or but what is reality? Is that like rules breaking?
See, I wanted to keep reality kind of vague because I did want it to be basically a whatever you want type deal.
Is
But
it subjectivity? Like, is that the experience of what people are seeing, like what they experience?
so so my idea of reality is kind of twofold, right? Like in one sense, it represents possibility. So it
Hmm.
represents like the panoply of dimensions that exist, right?
So
And you
probability.
can right, probability as well. So like you can look into the future and you can see the reality before you and you can manipulate it.
Okay.
But again, to go into the interconnectivity between the magic, that also relies on time, because you're also peering into time as well, and your manipulation of reality is based around your the other stuff as well. And the other ideas of reality is, again, it's more like a binding between for the other two, where like, is space gravity? Not really. It's more of like a reality type thing. And I guess maybe we can call it something else, but that's kind of the basic idea that I had surrounding it, at least for now.
Yeah, it makes me think like you're kind of thinking about like you said when you said possibility, that was really interesting because that makes me think of like probability. And I feel like in at least in science, that's something you can play with in science fiction a lot. So I wonder if in fantasy we could use that when you're thinking about looking into other possible realities. 'Cause I could see like for example, creating something from nothing might be interpreted as grabbing material from a different reality. That way you're
Mm-hmm.
summoning something, and that might be a reality you move.
Yeah, yeah, or like reality itself could be like manipulation of like what you have in front of you, essentially, right? So
Hmm.
that's kind of an interesting take on it as
Or
well.
like psi powers, yeah.
Well, I was thinking more like, hey, I want to manipulate, like I want to imbue something with, anti gravity, for example,
Hmm.
and then that's how reality. I think reality is a little bit looser. It was definitely the loosest of my ideas, like time and space, no problem. I
Hmm.
wanted a third one to kind of balance it out and kind of make it to have, because there are certain things that I wasn't sure that would fit into time, like that fit inside of the area that I wanted to mess around with.
Hmm.
And I was like, time and space for sure, and then reality, which is kind of the loose idea that I had. We can workshop it for later, but that's the
Cool.
general idea right now.
You could just have it as one of the lesser understood areas of magic. Like, just because you don't know how it works doesn't mean that people in that world even know how it works. It
Yeah,
could be
that's a
some
good
sort
point,
of
Chris.
breakthrough magician, theory person who theory person. There has to be a better word for that, but who gets the unified theory of magic.
Hmm.
Yeah, no, that's actually a really great point, Chris. I think that that's important to recognize as well, is that we don't have to have all the answers here. But
Maybe it
also, yeah,
represents uncertainty. That could be very simple.
yeah, and I mean that's possibility and probability
Hmm.
there as well.
Yeah.
And I mean, who knows? There could be like more than just the three that I have here. These are just the fundamental ideas that I wanted to talk about.
Okay.
Um, like we could even come up with like the anti, like Trinity, right, and have it be like void or something like that, where it's the absence of space or reality or
Ooh, I
something.
like that because it's kind of like it's almost like video game esque, but in a way that's like fun to play with.
Not to bring up JoJo yet again, but I do like the possibility of creative use of the magic of as we said, you might not be able to spontaneously create a fireball, but maybe you could save a spark of fire and save a seed, increase it to grow, and just have a flaming tree shoot someone.
Oh yeah, that's cool.
And that's actually why I wanted to focus on this type of magic, is because I want clever uses of stuff like that. That's why I was thinking, like, okay, with time magic, right? Like the idea that you're firing a bunch of cannonballs, slowing them, and then when your target passes by the cannonballs, you release the spell and they go at regular speed again. It's like,
Mhm.
oh god, we're getting pincer maneuvered by a single ship. That kind of thing. Or you could even do something like, hey, we're going to freeze these cannonballs in time so I can walk across them, like, so you're essentially, you know, you're able to board a ship by firing cannonballs, which I think is kind of cool. Like weird little like tricks like that I think are clever, as opposed to, hey, I have this one shot fire ability that I'm just going to hit you with over and over. Like I wanted something subtle and clever as opposed to just like a big stick of magic that you can hit people with. All right, so that was my fundamental one. I wanted to make sure that we were rooted in a fantasy world. Daniel, why don't you go ahead and tell me what you added that made it so we're now in a science fantasy world? Go ahead.
I mean, I do have one that's like that, but it can wait. This one I think dovetails into your concept, which I think is kind of neat. Obviously, if you're gonna have a sky civilization, you've got to have sky pirates of some kind. So or
Yeah,
sky
you do.
ships.
By
Yeah,
default.
you do. You have to have Sky Pirates. I'm so glad that
So
we're on board with this because that was one of mine
yeah.
as well. Hell
So these
yeah.
guys aren't quite. They're not pirates. So they're not. I mean, we can have pirates, obviously, but these guys are actually a guild of artifact hunters that are sky. They're a sky guild. And so what I had in mind is that on the surface of the world, whatever the surface is, there are these objects that have been scattered throughout, and we can decide like what the situation is down there, whether they're wreckage or they're treasures or whatever. But these artifacts contain fragments of intelligence or power in them that can bind to people if they're acquired. So these sky guilds, they're kind of these rogue captains who go from the sky nation or the sky civilization to go acquire these objects for powerful people, whether they're like government officials or they're I don't know powerful military people or wealthy people, whatever whoever they are, who's the highest bidder, so they can get the limited quantity of them, bring them back up, and the way I envision these objects working is that they have a unique power in them, which I guess would be governed by one of the trinity of forces that we just came up with. That it's kind of like a relic you'd attach to yourself, so they appear like as jewelry or as ornaments to be worn, and they bind to whomever has them.
Okay, so what does the magic do exactly? What kind of, like, you said it contains a
Mm-hmm.
strong force of the fundamental element, or the, hold on, let me try that again. So what does this magic do exactly? Like, or what do these items do exactly? Because you said that they're bound to people and they
Mm-hmm.
bind them to one of the three fundamental forces. So
Yeah.
what does that affect? How does that manifest?
So I want to leave that open-ended to you guys, but what I was thinking is that for one, the objects themselves represent some power from the world below, like some unique like intelligence or which ties into something else I'm going to add later. But when it's bound to someone, I want there to be a consequence. So maybe it can drive you to madness, or maybe it heightens maybe it heightens your paranoia or something. Like, I want it to have a negative effect in addition to giving you a power from whatever that power is, whether it's uh, increased control over reality or increased control over space, depending on the flavor of the object.
So it's an amplifier of whatever kind of magic you're manipulating already.
So I know the way I see it is like they're fragments of the world below. So whatever is going on in the world below, you're carrying up a fragment of that up into the world above, and in so doing, it enhances the wielder, but it also has a consequence because it's not meant to be in the world above.
No, okay, so Daniel, I'm sorry, Chris. I actually have to go now because that I think that works with with one of my ideas. Actually, it gets me really fucking excited because when you said there are shards of like what's below, it
Mm-hmm.
actually, so I came up with what and I know that this kind of takes a little bit of the mystery out of it, but I came up with what happened that forced people to leave the terra firma essentially.
Let me just
So
cross this out on my piece of paper.
yeah, go ahead. Well, we can no, we can make it work together, man. It's fine. That's what this is all about. Anyway, the idea is, and this is the idea that I had. So there were originally 3 moons in the sky, and they each represented one of the fundamental forces that I had in mind. And I don't know what happened. I was kind of leave that up to you guys, but something happened where now there's only one. And what I think happened is the moons were either destroyed or something like that. And so when you go and what happens, right, with this is the only moon left represents time. And so at night, depending on how full the moon is, it dramatically accelerates time. So when it first happened, people were accelerating time for a day or two at a time, and then eventually it gets to the point where when the moon is full, you're jumping weeks or months or even years in some cases, and obviously that would really fuck with any kind of civilization when you wake up and you're suddenly 10 years older. And it's not like you have 10 years worth of experience, it's just that you've aged 10 years in the matter of a night, that kind of thing. And for whatever reason, again, we're going kind of soft on the magic in this regard. When you're in the sky, when you're not on the ground itself, it doesn't affect it for
Oh,
whatever
I
reason.
see. Okay.
Yeah. And the reason I had to go because these fragments that you're talking about, Daniel, these things that like amplify your abilities and everything, or these things that kind of
Mm-hmm.
manipulate magic, they're pieces of the moon that have fallen to the earth.
Oh, the
They're
other
like,
moons. I
yes,
see.
yeah. So
So
so they're like,
that means that there's no time fragments, which is
correct.
interesting. Hmm.
Yes.
Oh,
But
I like
again,
that.
that yeah, yeah, exactly. That's why I
Hmm.
had to go. It's because okay, so now, and this is why like you when you go to the surface, you're good during the daytime. And if it's early in the phase of the moon, you can probably stay a couple days and whatnot.
Hmm. But once
But
it turns to night, time randomly accelerates.
exactly, so you have to get the fuck out of you have to get off the earth as soon as
It
possible.
it also
um,
implies a lot of things about the surface. This is the science fiction in me coming through, in that if you remove 2 moons from a world, you've severely fucked up the way that its tides work.
oh yeah.
So most likely that surface world, which there's still a lot of mystery about it, is that it's just pretty messed up. And you probably can't live down there easily.
Yes, you could, but it's like, man, your lifespan is so short. And
Hmm.
like there's a lot to this that I was thinking about that we could add and kind of mess around with. For example, right, like you have the corporations or the people who are kind of higher in the totem pole who are like, hey, look, your time is going to be short anyway. Like you're going to get paid shit, but you're going to go down there and live, like and work in the mines, and it doesn't matter that your life's going to accelerate. Like who fucking cares? Like that's one part of it, right? Where you have the exploitation of workers. And then there's a whole other part that I was thinking of where it's like, oh man, civilization is basically growing over its, or like there's no such thing as civilization, or if it is, it's extremely overgrown. Like
I mean,
imagine,
down there, right?
yeah, yes, exactly.
So
Imagine,
basically, it's like time dilations happening down there. So like down a few, like maybe like a day in the world above could, depending on the random phase of the moon, have been 15 years or a year
Right.
or 20 days, depending on each day changes the time down there.
Exactly.
Okay.
And now imagine like observing that and
Mhm.
watching like animal species evolve and like live and
Oh
die
wow,
and
that
like
is crazy.
there's yeah, and that's why I'm like, oh, this idea is super cool is because you can do
Yeah.
so much of it, like
And
there's
if, like you're saying, like if they sent like a bunch of people down there to a pocket to say you're going to live on this like fragment of a continent, and you're going to build this one resource, and then 200 years passes, so they can
right.
harvest it.
There's a lot of I thought that with this idea there's just a lot of cool shit that you can do in
Hmm.
terms of like how time works and watch it. And this way the other cool thing that I like about it is it gets into the idea that whenever you go down to the surface, it could be drastically different from the last time that you went and visited it. So
Yeah.
the hunt for resources is kind of always or often is like a crapshoot no matter what. And and the other thing I just realized now is those resources can drastically change. Like you could have gasoline or like coal or diamonds, stuff that requires time to move forward just change in a matter of months or day or years compared to other
It also means
compared
that
to how it is
time
now.
mages are very rare.
I didn't think about that, but yes, you're absolutely correct.
I was thinking one of the unique things about that, and also going into the time dilation and everything, is when it's floating, it's also tidally locked with that area. This way, it doesn't experience any sort of flow of different time. It is constantly floating in the same spot. It is maybe in a area of eternal sun or twilight or however you wish to do it, but the fact that it's moving above the Earth as it rotates, or whatever we want to call this planet, is making it that the time dilation that it would have even experienced that high up isn't taking any sort of effect because it's
What
staying locked in one area.
what
Oh,
are you
that's
talking
why it
about
doesn't affect it.
specifically?
Okay.
Say one of the giant continents or one of the floating islands or anything is
Oh,
floating in
oh
such a
sorry.
way that it is tidally locked with what is above, like in its area of space.
Okay,
Oh, I see.
see,
That you're explaining why it doesn't time dilate.
Correct.
I see.
Okay, see,
It's
I
because
wasn't thinking that we had floating islands or continents. I was thinking that there is just a planet, and then above that are where people live. Like, but if you want to introduce that, go right ahead. Like,
All right.
I didn't have that idea in mind. I had it so it was like there's the Earth, and then there's everything above that you have to kind of live off of.
oh, I pictured a continent above in the sky, kind of like Chris is saying.
Yeah.
See, yeah, okay. So, and this is the thing. This is the part that we kind of have to like hammer down and hammer out. So, Chris, go ahead and introduce that for me, please. So now we have floating continents that are
Yeah.
tidally locked. Go ahead.
Yeah. That was pretty much the premise of how they avoid any sort of time dilation and keep what would it be, like a consistent amount of time? Because if it was different areas and floating in anything, it would be vastly different. But at least this way, they can have something that people can look to and be like, no, this is the constant. You might come up and you might have experienced a change of 50 years between the last time that you came up, but you can still visit someone who was there 50 years ago and see your old friend. He might
So
be a
can we?
lot younger than you, but
So can we make that like so? Okay, can we make something about that floating continent really special? Can we basically have it be like there's just the one, and it's not
Yeah,
even necessarily that large?
I
Like
like
so
that.
it's like
Yeah, because then it's like it's the way it's where they escape to.
yeah. And not only that, but we can also have it be like I'm thinking that we could have that area in particular be like the baddies essentially, where it's like the big bad empire. It's like the time immemorial empire, where it's
Mhm.
like these are the only ones to survive. And maybe it's because they're like a floating island of time mages, like maybe that's where time magic
Maybe
stems
they
from.
lifted that continent up, and now they're in eternal sun. Like I really like that you said it could be eternal daylight. Like that's really cool.
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, that's very true.
And one of the other things that I was thinking is the whole reason that this island is floating and ever whatever, and the reason that you can have a lot of different kind of floating airships and other things is this is also made out of an element that is effectively lighter than air, just naturally. Like,
Okay.
I'm picturing something like vibranium or something, like, kind of like how Wakanda was on top of, that meteorite. This one is on top of, I don't know, suspendadium or something.
Suspendadium.
You heard me, spundadium.
Okay.
Like
I,
we
I
lost those two moons. Like maybe like when the two moons were lost, a piece of the time the time moon was broken off, and that's the continent that they rose up in.
Ooh, that's good. And so now you have like a weird fucked up. Yeah, that's cool. I like that. I like that a lot actually. Um so it's so the continent itself is so there was some great like astrological disaster that wiped out two
Yeah,
moons and a large chunk of the third
crazy
moon.
shit.
Yeah. And so like that chunk is now like floating like
Time
orbiting around.
mages, because the time mages
Yeah.
rose it up. That's freaking cool.
Yeah, okay. And it's naturally buoyant because it's the moon, I guess. And it's made of suspendium according to Chris.
Yes,
Spundanium.
Spundanium. Sorry,
Spandanium. I
spundanium.
love that.
That is the dumb. That's probably one of the dumbest things we've named here on the podcast for sure.
I mean,
Listen, still better than unobtainium.
I would
what's
agree
the
with
name
that.
of the What's the name of our moon? Selena. So they call it selenium. You know.
Gomez.
Daniel, don't you do this, Daniel. We're not doing this. Uh, okay. Cool. I'm down with this. I like everything that we're going with.
So I had a concept for an autocrat, and so I wanted someone who is overseeing the government, who the government officials themselves have never seen. So this autocrat,
Ooh.
no one knows what they look like or who they are specifically, just that they make pronouncements and are the ruler of the nation, and they're feared and revered. And that the government officials, like the adjuncts of this autocrat, speak to the autocrat by proxy, so they never directly see this person. Maybe they go to a chamber that has like, a face from which it makes pronouncements. But the autocrat themselves is a big mystery, and I'm assuming that the autocrat must be a very powerful time being of some sort, since it's capable of governing this whole country. But on the same side, you could think perhaps maybe the autocrat doesn't really exist, or maybe the autocrat is multiple people. So there's a lot of possibilities of what it could be. But just that I wanted it to be this very powerful, revered figure that's mysterious and unknown as to what it is.
Yeah, that's really cool actually. Because in my mind I've already created a headcanon of what this is. And it's like so first of all, you got this idea where it's like it's the faceless emperor, right?
Yeah.
And there's also this point where it's like, oh, you know what that is? That's just a time, like it's an incredibly powerful time mage, and it
Mm-hmm.
is either himself multiple times, kind of copied throughout time, where he's
Mm-hmm.
manipulating time and reality, so it's multiple versions of himself at different ages, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just all at the same time, or it's kind of like it's like a Madame Blavatsky kind of like you said, where it's like, oh, this is actually just an excuse for someone to be like, oh, I'm not issuing this decree, it's the
Uh,
emperor, where they're
or
the
it could be
actual
a council
person in
that's
charge.
faking the existence of him over
Yeah,
time.
The
exactly,
great
exactly, right.
masters.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
exactly right. The great math. It's not me. I mean, I'm not the one issuing this decree. It's the masters. You have to. Yeah.
I'm
Again,
reminded
like
of the autark from the Book of the Long Sun, although that was an actual being, just in the sense that it's this very mysterious entity that's feared and revered.
yeah, and I should point out that that's just my head canon. It's not necessarily the correct canon yet. Like that's just the idea that I had. But I'm like, I love anything that creates mystery, and anything that it's like, oh yeah, you like you're is by creating that question mark, you're giving everyone else license to be like, yeah, do whatever you think is coolest. Like that kind of thing. And I love stuff like that in settings, like where there's a question mark or there's like enough space for you to go crazy with.
Guys, I think we've just devised a dying Earth setting
No,
because
Hmm.
it
no, we haven't.
it fits all the qualifications of a dying Earth setting.
No, we're not doing that.
It's
We
too
are not
late. You
doing
did
that.
it already.
No, I refuse.
You have a world that's post ruin. You you I don't We don't have the big bloated sun, which I think is required. But we also have high magic that could potentially have been technological since we have time dilation. We're on the precipice.
Oh no.
So my third one is my third
It,
idea is it's definitely not a dying Earth. Actually, if you want, I can send you the link where it's like it's in bold letters. Definitely
Not.
not a dying Earth. Yeah. No, but I do want to. I do want to continue to touch on your autocrat here for a bit because I think it's
Mhm.
important to note that like the flying or the floating like empire that we have here or the floating kingdom or whatever is not the norm. I think that I want to make clear that that's not the normalcy, because it's not like everyone is on this one cramped little planet. I always had the idea of, everyone else is basically living in floating cities, like where they're made up of what are essentially hot air balloons, right? Where
Oh,
they're
okay.
keeping themselves like aloft through cities made of hot air balloons. That's my idea.
Oh, cool. So are these on
could
also
be.
like on fragments of the time moon as well?
No, no, actually, I was just thinking that it's like natural gas, and that's one of the things that they have to harvest is like a natural gas that can keep them afloat long enough so they're not just like, because the city can sink and everything like that. There's all sorts of stuff that you can do with it that I think is interesting.
That could also be one of the advantages of that continent is the fact that they don't have to worry about that since it's made out of a naturally floating
Right.
substance,
Smart.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly right. Yeah.
And
giving them the power.
it creates some interesting conflict too, because now you have, like you said, this really powerful, secure nation that most likely wants to force everyone else who's occupying its airspace to be part of its dominion. So you have ragtag, potentially ragtag captains trying to avoid this empire and saying like we own the skies too, and so there's this war in the skies that's independent of all the stuff that's happening below.
Oh, that's exactly what I had in mind. Where I actually didn't have the idea of like a floating continent at first, but now that we've added that, like that, I had it mostly where it's like a bunch of rogue, like clans
Traders.
essentially. Yeah, no, not necessarily traders, but they could be. But it's like a bunch of rogue communities that are forced to kind of slap together, and they all have airships or floating hot air balloons and stuff like that to keep cities aloft, and they create communities with one another. And I think it's kind of cool because moving cities and stuff like that where people can be like, oh, we're trading with this other city in a couple days because we're physically going to fly next to it soon, stuff like that. Or sky battles also very cool.
Yeah, I think all that works because now you have kind of like a larger city state, and then you have a bunch of other interacting kind of free nations, and we also have the Sky Guild that I assume is neutral to all of those and interacts with all of them.
Well, I'd say neutral in like quotation marks, like self-serving is more the way that
Hmm.
I would see it. But yeah,
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like they're not
yeah,
taking a side of either one.
right. So okay, so now we have okay, that's kind of cool actually, because now you have what could air quotes be the rebels with like these little flying cities and stuff like that, and then you have the empire, which is a continent, and
Yep.
obviously like the continent, the empire has a huge advantage because they don't have to worry about resources to keep them aloft, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And they apparently have a leader who seems to be immortal or beyond time.
And some, yeah, exactly, and some kind of incredibly powerful magic user of some kind.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. This is all
Mm,
coming
mm,
together.
mm,
It's
mm.
cool.
So this idea for mine comes from Made in the Abyss.
Oh
If
yeah.
you've ever seen the anime, yeah, I know you have.
I know you, yeah, I was like, we watched it together, Chris. Yes, we
I
yes.
believe you've seen it, have you?
Son of a bitch.
But I did want it to be that kind of like these airships also work in a way of being reverse submersibles at the same time, in the fact
Oh.
that as they go closer to like the bedrock and the bottom, because I picture any of this like the terrain being somewhat malleable and the fact that reality is kind of weird down there,
Mhm.
and the fact that you might have to use your ship to navigate in between like spires of rock or like even slightly floating rocks that just aren't worth it like to mine, or maybe that could be something that people actually look for to just like, hey, if we have this next month, we'll only need X more fuel because this will keep us aloft by 200 pounds.
Mhm.
But I picture as they go further down, it just gets weirder.
Oh
And
my god, I also had that idea. We're on the same page.
and also going into your aspect of, I think you call them artifacts.
Yeah. Or relics, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah, going back into the time dilation, the fact that maybe in a blink of an eye, thousands of years could pass.
Mm-hmm.
People who are left down there, have we established whether or not they experience the passage of time, or whether,
I
like, you
think
wake
they
up and
should if
suddenly you're
it's
50
time
years
dilation.
older?
I think
No,
they have to if it's time dilation.
well, see, the way that I had it is that it wasn't necessarily dilation, just acceleration. So it's a matter of you wake up and 50 years are gone and you're like wrinkled and you're like, oh shit, like what happened to my life? Like you have no idea what happened.
Mm.
And it's not
Well,
like you lived it, you know?
so I just wanted to say, can we unpack the way time works a little bit? Because I think that's important to how this would all
Sure.
like, tie together. Only because when you have time dilation, it's always from someone's perspective. So, for example, if we're saying like if I'm on the floating empire state, right, and it has a fixed time in the sense that time passes at a different rate for people up there, and they're looking down, and their expectation is, from day to day, what's going on down there, more time could have passed like one day for them might have been like 500 years down there on one of their days. um if we don't have the people down there actually experience those 500 years, I think two things go away. One, you lose the risk of going down there, because I could go down there, experience 500 years, and then wake up, and now if I go back up, it's only been a day, but like nothing's really happened to me. But if I went down there and 500 years passes, it may be like only another day for me. But then when I come back out, it's 500 years later. That's what time dilation ends up being. So it's like the
Yeah.
question is like what's the relationship between the two? Like, is it that if I go down there, because you remember the movie Interstellar, like for example,
Hmm.
where they had the fear of going down on that planet, and if they didn't get out in a certain amount of time, a lot of time would pass for them relative to what's outside of that planet. So like if they stay down there too long, when they come back up, it's now 500 years later. That's what the effect of time dilation is. Now we
Yeah,
can
see,
do it the magical way, the opposite way, where it's like they kind of go to sleep and don't experience it. But it's like, what's the passage mean then?
okay, so I do want to make sure that this is the distinction where this acceleration of time, it's not like 500 years at a shot, right? It is at most a year during one night though, right? So
Okay.
or let's say that let's cap it at 10 years, let's say, right?
Mhm.
And when I say it's not necessarily dilation because you don't experience the time, it's a matter of accelerated decay. So you'll wake up and you were, 20 before, and you wake up and you're 30 or 40, let's say. And
Mhm.
you haven't, all you've experienced is the accelerated aging process. It's not like you got to experience and live
Oh,
10
okay.
years.
So maybe
It's a,
what we should say is not time but entropy, because that's what you're talking about.
is well, the entropy is just a matter of time, isn't it? Like it's a synonym in that regard.
Well, I mean, the effect of time is entropy. So that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Like maybe we call it time for the sake of like fantasy and magic, but what's really happening is it's accelerating the entropy that's
Yes. Okay.
going on
Yeah.
down
Yeah. Yeah. That.
I was kind of picturing it as being like someone goes down and then someone comes up and they have like a 200-year-old promissory note that just like, my grandfather gave this to me and said that if I delivered this limestone, I would get citizenship.
Oh yeah. No. The way that I had it in mind is that if you're living on the surface, your lifespan is being cut down significantly, just because it's like, oh hey, I'm going down there, and then you stay there for like a week during the full moon, and all of a sudden 50 years has passed, and you come back up, and it's not like you lived 50 years, but it's a matter of, oh, I'm now 50 years old, and I'm only actually 20 years old, that kind of thing.
So to tie that up, that means like, when you go down there, the risk that you're facing is that you might experience a lot of entropy, meaning a lot of decay in a short period of time. So like I might have gone down there for a day, the moon passes, and if it hits me with a year of entropy or 15 years of entropy, then when I come back up, it's the same like day, just that I feel 15 years older.
Correct. And
Okay.
which is why I think when you look at like the reason I wanted to have it be in phases of the moon is so people could understand what was happening and they would have enough time to prevent it or at least try
Or go
and
at a
stop
better
it.
time. So
Right.
basically, it's not time to just for our listeners. We're not talking about time dilation. We're talking more about kind of like sped up entropy. And so the time
Yes.
on the continent and the time on the surface is equivalent. It's just that there's more entropy on certain days when you go down there.
Correct.
We're talking about a
Correct.
lot of
Yes.
shit I don't understand. So yes.
I know,
No,
yes,
no, this is
I know that that's going to get we're going to called out for not handling time dilation properly. So that's why I want to make the distinction
no,
here.
and that's fine. That's totally fine because that's like like you said, you're the one who knows more about sci-fi. I just wanted to fuck around with time because I thought it would be cool. Like I'm coming
And
at
there's a
it from
definite
from a
relationship,
But,
like you're saying, between the
but
two.
could I break a rule for my thing?
oh god
And I
damn it. Yeah.
no. But I also have a way that it's super rare. Okay.
Okay, okay. Well, I
And since we're
so
going with phases of the moon, solar
okay, go
eclipse.
ahead. Go ahead. So yeah, no,
Ooh, solar eclipse.
exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the type of shit that I'm talking about where like you can have stuff like that happen and it drastically affects the world. Like that like absolutely. Like that's part of why I'm here. That's part of what I'm into when it comes to stuff like that where you have the exceptions, you have eclipses. And I did think about that as well cuz yeah, that shit's cool as fuck.
Yeah. So what's the thing?
Yeah, what's the thing, Chris?
The idea that I had, which was coming from Made in the Abyss, is I wanted artifacts from a not like a precursor civilization, but a group of people that had experienced accelerated time down there. They have died out, but some of the artifacts and the things that they built still exist there. And the way that I was going to explain that there are these ruins and other things down there is the tidally locked island experienced the inverse of time due to the fact that there was a solar eclipse, and since they're always in the sun as it would be, they experienced where time froze for them, but it accelerated below them.
That's really cool.
Mm.
That's pretty fucking cool. And I think what we can do with that as well is we can have it be so it's like it's entropy for most, but you'll have pockets where it is dilation. Maybe we can do both. Maybe we can have our cake and eat it too, Daniel, where we can experience dilation and like accelerated entropy, so we can have it both
Ooh, maybe
ways.
it's so maybe they're visible pockets. Like if I go down there and it's like a 1 year entropy moon phase, right? So I know that I'm going to lose a year of my life when I come back out in terms of the decay of my body. But there's certain if I'm flying my ship around, I'm trying to get to that deep dark crevice to get that artifact. There might be these glowing yellow pockets. And if I pass through them, for the few seconds I'm in there, it's actually like 15 hours, right? And I come back out and it's 15 hours later. I'm like, crap, I just lost 15 hours. It's closer to the end of the phase. Now I risk, being in a different phase of the moon where there's even more entropy afflicting me. So you've got to avoid these little time dilation pockets while you're traveling.
Or you can have people who seek them out. Like these knowledge
Man,
seekers who are like, I want to experience time dilation
to
because it
bide their
means,
time.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, I love that.
Oh man, this is getting
Genius.
fucking
That's good stuff.
ridiculous. Oh my god, one other thing I did want to talk about with the floating island that you're talking about, Chris.
Hmm.
Uh, a couple of things. How do you guys feel about the island itself, like not having any control over where it moves? So like the Empire doesn't have an opportunity to kind of steer itself, right? Because it's kind of at the mercy of this moon rock. But all the other, like kind of rogue nations can because they're literally flying cities.
Yeah,
And
I
then,
think Chris said it's locked to where it is, right?
oh yeah, that's right. You said you did say that it was like it
It,
was stuck in
but
one
it doesn't
place. Yeah.
necessarily mean that it's tidally locked with sunlight. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's geographically because the planet's moving underneath. So
Oh
Oh,
it
yeah.
could be
because
Okay.
where
it's
it's just
moving to the
floating
sun.
left and right, and
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, and to further steal from Made in Abyss, I actually want to talk about the idea that there's like a giant hole or a crater where, let's say that the moon originally impacted this area, and
Oh,
now it's like a
this is impinging upon mine.
yeah. No, this is not one of my ideas. I'm just like tossing it out there because I thought it'd be cool. But go ahead. What were you going to say, Daniel? You have yours. Go ahead.
I think you're going exactly where my last one was going to go, which originally was the sentence I had originally. There was a place beneath the oceans rumored to be the source of the planet's power, but given all the things we've come up with, it seems like we know the source of the power is the other moons. So that must mean where those moons crashed, there's an intense amount of this magical energy that's accessible, but it's deep, deep, deep underneath the oceans in all this weirdness that Chris was describing. And I wanted it to be that the closer you got to those moons, just like Chris was saying too, is the weirder the landscape down there gets and the stranger things are. Kind of like, like a Lost in Space where they were approaching all this weird messed up time area. Or like in No Man's Sky, the promise of the planets being weirder the closer you got. And I wanted it to be too that it's hard to know. You can't really know exactly where these moons crashed, but you can approach that area and it's going to be a really tough ride to get to them.
Yeah. Okay. I'm cool. I'm cool with that. Where it's like you have pockets of like just incredibly warped reality and space, perhaps.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And then that's why you have like fragments of time that are dilated because again, it's fragments of the moon that have been shattered and like messed up. Okay, yeah. No, we can fuck with this for sure.
Mine was going to be another advantage of the empire of like the internal sun. I wanted it to be once again going to the fact that they have that kind of element that allows them to keep their city buoyant is also something that they get as a military aspect in the fact that they can iron plate these things and it won't affect the buoyancy, whereas other people need to use wood and shit because
Ooh.
and it just makes me think of Iron Skies.
That's
Oh, I
really
see what you mean.
cool.
So like they don't, because they're like, because what they're lifted up by is magical. They're not really concerned with like how armored and defended and how much stuff is on their continent. Whereas other rogue sky nations, like they have to worry about like what they're carrying because they're naturally lifting themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because like wood is obviously much lighter than steel, and so you're not going to have like steel ships with like hot air balloons and stuff like that. Oh, that's really cool, Chris. That's a really great
Yeah,
conceit on top of the empire. So it's like they have resources as a major uh, advantage compared to the other.
their technology just obviously like they don't have to
Yeah,
worry about like they don't have to balance anything when it comes down to it.
yeah,
But I guess
yeah.
their only weakness is that they have a predictable location, right? So the way the
Right.
rebels can fight them is that they can be anywhere, whereas the Empire always is a certain place, following the phases of the sun or whatever.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah,
Okay. So and this is the thing. I don't think that people recognize how important mobility is when it comes to warfare. Like knowing where your enemy is going to be is like such a massive part of like warfare in general. So
hmm
it's like they think that there is an advantage here, but it's actually I think it feels like it barely equals out to be about the same with a
yeah.
slight advantage for the empire overall.
That must be why the Empire wants to wrangle them under their control because they can't sit there like forever and just defend themselves, you know?
Right. Right. Oh man. Okay. This set guys, this fucking setting is really cool and I'm getting so into it. I was already excited before, but now that we've talked about it, I'm like, yes. Everything
It
about this
sounds
is
like
fucking rad.
I like that we haven't tried to mess with the mystery too much of like the collapse of the moons or really what's going on down there. Because I feel like if there's some ominous stuff going down in there, that's stuff to be discovered by like either the stories or the players or whoever interacts with the setting.
That's for philosophers and mage scientists. Right
Yeah,
now the powers that be are not caring about the larger picture.
Yeah.
exactly.
I think when we talked to James Sutter, he made this point as well. It's like having mystery is such an important part of the setting, and I agree. Leaving that mystery alone is part of the fun here, right? It's part of the important part of getting people interested and involved in this because like I said, I have my own headcanon for the empire and emperor and everything like that, but that's not true. That's not necessarily correct. As and I think that a lot of established settings should have that as well, where it's like, yeah, that's their idea, that's the creator's idea, but I think that this idea is better, and that's what
Yeah,
I'm going to run with. I think that's really important to keep in mind whenever anyone is creating a setting, where you can basically take an entire setting and then change something about it. And of course, there's going to be like the butthurt nerds who are like, well, in canon, that's not actually how it is, like stuff like that. To which I say, like, yes, in that canon, that's true, but this is the canon that I'm creating and it's different. So you
hmm
have to accept that reality. Like all of this other stuff is true, but I'm tangent over,
I'm
rant
with
over.
you, but I do have to say that does undermine all of me and Daniel who have bitched about Star Trek and Star Wars.
Well, I think what we're complaining about, though, to in our defense, is not canon, but being true to the genre you're writing in, right? So if you're not writing utopian fiction, you're not writing Star Trek. That's what we're saying.
Right.
Okay,
It's
okay.
it's
Thank
like
you for
what you're
justifying
more
us.
angry about. Yeah. No, you guys aren't mad that Picard is bad and like ruins the character, because all that other TNG stuff still happened and still exist. It's that this new series does not ruin that character. It's like you can still accept it as, okay, this is the sequel where all sorts of bad dumb shit happens. And you're mad not at the fact that your character is ruined, because he's not. He's still over there in 1980 something on TNG, right?
1992.
But it's, well, no, it was 80s something when it started, right?
Really?
Yeah, the very end of the 80s.
Yeah, it's like 89 when TNG started.
Yeah.
Anyway, how do I know more about TNG than you do, Chris? Fuck's sake. But my point
I don't know
being, right,
dates.
is that, like,
I know their dates.
all right, anyway, my point being is that TNG still exists. And so when you look at new Picard, he's not ruining the old Picard, because that still exists. But what you're mad about is the idea that this whole idea that you had of what sci-fi and specifically what Star Trek should be is not true to what you had in mind when you're talking about TNG and other Star Trek. Is that basically?
Yeah, I mean,
what I have?
it's kind of it's kind of like if I set out to write like a Lord of the Rings esque story, so like high heroic adventures, and the evil is personified abstractly and all of that, and I end up writing like a gritty, realistic, grimdark fantasy where they're tracking resources and it's all about like surviving in a post apocalypse. I have failed to write high fantasy, right?
Right.
So that's what we're saying. You have to be true to the genre you're setting, the expectations you're setting up in the genre.
Absolutely. And if you wanted to do a grimdark high fantasy, you can do that.
Yeah.
But like maybe maybe try and do it in a little your own way. Like maybe not marry it to a franchise that's so, whatever.
Like, don't promise that this is going to be the most thoughtful representation of Captain Picard that we've seen when you're just going to give people swords to behead people. That's the opposite of what you promised.
All right. Well, that was a rant. That was a severe rant, but I'm glad that we got it out there. Yeah. Did we have any other thoughts about our? Okay, we have to come up with some kind of a name for this, right?
With 1,000 in it.
Yeah, that's true.
No. That
should. I think we should have 1,000.
So it should always be Land of 1,000 blank. I don't.
Yeah.
I wanted to get away from that naming convention because
I love that convention.
Okay, the last two that we did, one we had to do Land of 1,000 mods because it rhymed with gods and it was about cyberpunk. So obviously,
it's hilarious.
But then, like our listener email was like, "Hey, I want to name it this because it's solar punk and also pots us in plants."
It doesn't have to rhyme.
No, I'm not saying that, but I'm just like, maybe we can not have the same name all the time.
Land of 1,000 moons, Land of 1,000 skies.
There's not 1,000. There's only one sky.
Yeah, there's only the one sky.
Well, but there's technically different
Land
skies.
of eternal sunshine and the spotless moon.
There's
literally a giant spot in the moon, Chris. That's part of the fucking. All right, so we're just gonna have to figure out a name some other point.
Maybe it'll appear in the title of the thing.
I think I think I've named this one Sky Livin' for the time being, which is a really dumb name, but I'm down with it. So whatever.
I'm always thinking about branding here.
I know that you can't help it. The freelancer in you won't allow it.
Sky never sets on Sky Britain.
We're just, I can't have this in the podcast. I'm going to cut all this, but still, we have to come up with a better name.
Yeah, I'm super pro Land of 1,000 something.
Yeah, but there's no Land of it. Like we can't.
Well, you gotta take it metaphorically. Like there's 1,000 different skies, for example, in this setting.
But there's not. There's just the one sky.
Well, think of it from the perspective of the inhabitants, right? There's the sky of the Empire. There's the sky of the rebels. There's the sky of the Sky Guilds. They're all they're all
Can
dealing
we,
with
can
different
we wait? Can we have? Hold on. Let's do something even dumber. Can we have this
Mhm.
be the
Oh,
sky of
man.
1,000 lands?
Yes, that's even better. I love that. That's perfect. Sky of 1,000 lands.
Oh, it's so dumb. I
Oh
hate
my
it
god,
so
I'm
much.
250% behind that.
God damn it. That was supposed to be a dumb, funny
No,
joke.
no,
So
no,
good.
it's happening.
It's so good.
Oh,
It's brilliant. You're a
now I
genius.
have
No
to keep
stupid
this.
ideas.
Now I have
You're
to keep this. So when
fucking
people look at the
genius.
dumbass name, they're gonna be like, "How the fuck did they get to this?"
So good.
I apologize for everyone who listened to the last 10 minutes of that. That was just utter nonsense.
Sky of 1,000 lands.
Yeah. All right. All right. Fine. That's what it is. It's so dumb. God damn it. All right. Thanks. So now you get to see how the sausage is made sometimes, folks. And that's just how it
We
is.
badger him into agreeing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's actually more accurate than you
Abuse,
think.
Oh, we
basically.
never had
Yeah.
aphids.
I know. We didn't get the sky aphids. Fuck. Damn it.
All right. So that'll wrap it out for this episode. Join us next time as we discuss the technology, conflicts, and factions within the Sky of 1,000 Lands setting that we've created.
Ah.
Thanks for putting up with our fucking dumb bullshit, you guys. But that was this episode. Remember, if you want to suggest your own setting and dumb name, you can always email us at worldbuildwithus@gmail.com, or you can send us a tweet or DM at Let's Worldbuild. And remember that we love you very much. We hope you have a great week, and we're all in this together. Until next time.